So to begin, why don't you tell us your name and the years you attended West Warwick?
Okay. My name is Lana Willeen Snyder. I'm commonly known, or more often known as Willeen. Very few people know me as Lana. In fact, I think I was an adult before my mother said to me, "You really need to start signing things with your legal name." What is my legal name? And anyway, it was my grandma had named me that.
Okay.
And so now I sign with that, but I am willing to everyone.
Yes, you are. So what years did you attend West Warwick?
I think
45?
45 through 50.
51, I would guess.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. And you had older brothers and sisters?
Mhm. Yes.
And they went to West Warwick as
They
well?
went to West Ward as well. My sister Elaine, she was the oldest, and my brother Mac, and myself, and then we had Lizzie. Lizzie was young.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. In going to school, did you walk with them or did you walk with friends in the neighborhood?
You know, we all walked together. We all lived close together, and so we all walked together, brothers and sisters. Of course, in those days, parents told you, walk with your brother or your sister, whoever, you're supposed to stay close together. And then, we meet up with the neighborhood kids.
Yeah. Did you live on Culver Street for the whole time you were at West Warwick?
No, when we first came to Albion, we lived on Gale Street. And then later, we moved to Culver Street. And I lived on Culver Street until I graduated from high school.
Okay. So getting to West Warwick, can you recall and share with us what a normal day was like for you in school in any grade?
Let's see. Okay, things come back to my mind that really stick out. And I remember, I don't know if this lady was from the state Board of Education or from the county. I really don't know. Probably the state, because once a year, someone would come and test us to see just how well we were doing in school. And her name, and after all these years, I still remember it. Her name was Miss Bethel. And the reason I remember her name is because the first day she came to talk to us, she said, now my name is similar to a church that's near here, and blah, blah, blah. And she was talking, and so I'm sitting there, and of course we all went to Bethel. And I said, "Is it Bethel?" And she said, "Yes." She was Miss Bethel. But she came from, I would assume, probably the state. I was a child, so I really don't know. But I do recall she came in and she tested us, and she would ask various questions. And I know it was to test our knowledge. And I remember specifically one day she wrote some words on the board, and one of them was knowledge. And so we were sitting there and we were talking with her, and she said, "Now, who knows what letter you take out to make this knowledgeable?" And I knew, so I went to the board and I crossed the letter out. But that was just one of the things that I remember. I also remember once Miss Biggs, the kindergarten teacher, Miss Biggs gave me a book, and it was a book about a kitten. I remember that so well. It was a hardback book, and I've always been intrigued with reading. And at recess, I remember taking the book outside and sitting on the step, and I'm just reading. So some of the older children came over, and of course, I was young and I was small, and they want to know, where did you get up? Where did you learn to read? But that's just one of the things, but I also recall when Miss Ferguson was our teacher, and once a month, Mrs. Ferguson would take a group of students from the school to her home, and she served us tea. She served, you remember that? She served
I
us
heard
tea.
about it, yeah.
Mhm.
Do you remember anything about her house?
Her house, it was on Albion Street, and it's no longer there now, to my knowledge.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's been torn down and other houses have been built, but her home it was amazing. She had books, she had, I don't know, it was just fun to be in her home.
Mhm.
And her husband's name was Clifton.
Yeah.
Mhm. And they always welcome us into their home, but she just had this habit of,
Mhm.
and I think it was her idea to, let us know some of the nicer things in life, because she didn't pick certain students, and we'd go to her home, we'd have tea, and, she talked to us, and it was just really nice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you ever see, he's my Uncle Clifton's
Oh,
train?
really?
Yeah, she was my aunt.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Did he ever show you that elaborate train set he had?
No, I never saw
Okay.
that.
Who were the rest of your teachers?
Let's see, Miss Biggs, of course, when I began, Miss Stewart, Miss Georgiana Stewart.
Yes.
Mrs. Ferguson, and Miss Holmes. Mhm.
Okay. Other than Miss Ferguson, did you have any contact with any of the other teachers outside of school?
You know, outside of school, okay, Miss Holmes, of course, lived right on the corner of Albion and Cass Street. So as you came back and forth to school or church or whatever, you saw Miss Holmes, and she was a very presence. I can't say that, you mean interacting outside of.
Yeah, I mean, you
school
might have
or-
had contact in church or in some other kind of.
Well,
group.
okay, at church or at the store or something, you'd
Yeah.
see them, but that was about it.
Okay. In addition to what you mentioned about the visiting
Mhm.
person, any other classroom activities that stand out?
Yes, we had art, I believe it was Miss Phillips
Okay.
would come, and we'd have art, she did our art teaching, and music, I believe it was Miss Ferguson. If I'm not mistaken,
She did.
she did the music, I think she played the piano, I do believe.
Yeah,
Now,
so that
I
was,
could be
that
wrong.
would have been Lydia Phillips
Mhm.
that came in
Yeah.
to do the art.
Mhm.
Okay. What do you remember, if anything, about the kind of discipline that was used in the school if kids were acting out?
Actually, I don't remember a lot of discipline having to be done, because when I went to school and when I grew up, parents told you what was what, how you were expected to behave, and if you didn't, the teacher usually got with the parent, and the parent took care of it. But I know I was never disciplined at school, and I don't remember if there would have been, I don't really remember. I suppose there were incidents, but I don't recall.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Do you remember who the custodian was?
I don't think so, because I don't think I ever saw him. You could go to school in the morning, the building was clean, but I don't think
Okay.
I ever saw him.
Well, let's talk about activities that are centered around holidays. Do you remember anything connected with Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas?
Yeah, we'd have, at Halloween, we had Halloween parties, and then I recall at night, there was parents came with you, and there were activities going on at school. Valentine's Day, we all drew names, or I don't know if we drew names or if we just shared Valentine's, but I remember that. And we'd have probably some refreshments and stuff like that. But every holiday,
There was something.
there was something done.
Okay. What about recess? Do you
Okay.
remember recess and what that was like and what you played on?
Yeah. Okay, at recess time, of course, there was the merry-go-round everybody talks about, and you had to be really good to get on that merry-go-round. But there was the merry-go-round, and the older kids, my brother and sister and the bigger kids, they all played baseball. They were good, and I always wanted to play baseball, but I was never good enough. So the only time I'd get chosen was if they didn't have enough people to even the teams up, and then I was always the last one chosen. But there was baseball, and of course the merry-go-round, the swings, we had swing sets. And I remember field day, we'd have field day, when the races and all those things, near the end of school,
Yeah,
it was
end of
probably
school.
the last day of school.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you were at recess, do you remember like smelling scents from the Gale or from the Malibu or having debris in the air or anything associated with the factory coal dust?
At the time, being a child, you don't notice, those things, or you really, but knowing where I live, and, because we lived near the Gale, the Malibu wasn't too far from us, and then eventually, the stuff on your windowsills, just, you knew there was something in the air.
Okay. So people have mentioned belonging to safety patrol.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, were there any other kinds of groups organized within the school that you participated in?
Okay, there was, excuse me, at one time, and this was very enjoyable, there was a group of young women from Albion College, and they'd come down, and I don't remember exactly what day they'd come, but it was either, actually, it was, I don't know if it was called Girls Club, but it was, that's really what it was, and they were wonderful. And I still remember the name of one of them because I was so impressed with her. Her name was Joanne Jacoby, and she was a student at Albion College then. And they'd come down and we played games, we did different things, and then sometimes, and I do recall going once to their sorority house, and if I'm not mistaken, it's the house, it's on the corner of Michigan Ave, and I think that's Hannah Street. It probably wouldn't be, the same now, but at that time, I remember them taking us there for a Christmas party one time.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other connection with the college for any kind of other activity or play or?
That specifically stuck out in my mind,
Mhm.
but there must have been, because in thinking about this, you can remember different times that you were in places that normally you wouldn't have been.
Right, right.
But that specifically stuck out in my mind.
Okay.
Those young women were just wonderful.
Did you have the occasion to interact with kids from the other schools, the other elementary schools, for any activity?
No. I'd have to say no. No.
Or did your brother play, I know we used to have softball, and we would play the other schools. You know,
I don't remember.
okay. When I was in 5th grade, there was a camp for a week. Did you go to
Yes,
5th at Clear Lake?
Clear Lake.
Did you go to camp?
I didn't get to go because I was ill the week of camp, and I cried and cried because finally I'd gotten old enough to go to camp. Everybody waited for 5th grade so you could go to camp.
Camp, yeah.
Finally, I was old enough, and I was sick and
Yeah.
under the doctor's care, and I couldn't go.
Okay, okay.
So it was Camp Clear Lake.
Yeah, okay. What about food, lunch, nutrition break? Do you remember, did you eat lunch at school or did you just walk home?
We walked home,
Okay.
but I remember the nutrition breaks.
And what was your
The
break?
nutrition breaks. Okay, let's see, there was cheese. There were either figs or prunes, maybe figs.
I had figs,
Must
yeah.
have been probably figs. Let's see, what was it? Cheese, figs, orange juice.
Yeah.
And there were no, there were no refrigerators at our school. And in the basement, that's where they kept, there was you walked around the side and you could go down these steps. And it was really cool down there. I mean, cool like, cold. And that's where they kept the nutrition.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you actually went into the basement.
Yeah.
Do you recall what it looked like in there? Because you're one of the few.
When there were about 3 steps, you went down, and then you kind of walked in, and whoever put the juice and the whatever was in there, and the older students were the ones that, the teacher would have go down and get it.
Okay. Did you ever have a chance to go in there during the summer when it was like recreation outside, not class, and see what was in the basement?
No, I don't recall during school.
Do you recall seeing, not a mural necessarily, but any kind of painting on the wall in the basement?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't recall.
Well, that's good. Finally, somebody
Yeah,
went into the
there was,
basement.
you'd go around the side and down these steps, and we never went alone, There were other, students and a teacher.
All right, since you lived on the same side of town as I did, do you recall hearing any kind of story? It was designed to scare us from going up on the playground like after sundown. And I talked to my sister, and she brought it up that there was this story about the old woman and her pigs, and that if you got caught up there, you'd be chased away.
Everybody, and we believed it.
Oh yeah, I know.
We really believed it. I don't know where it came from, who told it or what, but we really believed it.
Oh yeah, I went looking for her. Yeah, okay. Well, that's good, and it's nice to have that confirmation that somebody else knows. What about the atmosphere of the building itself, as you remember it? Was it bright, cheerful, dark, gloomy? How do you remember it being?
I can't say gloomy because as I recall the building, when you came in the front, if you came in the front side, I think, okay, there was a large hallway, and then Miss Biggs' room was kind of like
To the left.
To the left. And I don't recall it being gloomy.
Mhm.
And I remember that one side of, one of the classrooms was our library. And I always liked to read, so, you know,
Yeah.
I couldn't say gloomy because when I got into books, I just didn't
Yeah.
pay attention.
Okay. So was it a comfortable place to you?
As a child,
Yeah.
well, as a child, that was all we had, so it was comfortable to us. But as I grew older and realized that there was, you know, it really was not. In fact, my sister Liz was, I think she was 4 grades behind me. She must have been, because when they closed West Ward, she was in maybe 3rd grade. I know I was at middle school then, or well, it was Washington Garden.
Yeah, junior high.
At junior high. And I recall at that time when they closed West Ward, Miss Biggs would open up her home for the children to come in and be able to study and keep up with their lessons and
Okay.
everything.
Okay.
And really, I have to say this, until I went to Washington Gardner, I had never ever sat in a classroom with white kids. I never had.
Oh, no, I don't think any of us had.
And even at the movies, you know, we were segregated on the one side. We had to sit, if you went to the Albion Theater, which is now the
Hardware
that
store.
hardware store, if you went there, you sat, let's see, it was the left-hand side.
Yeah,
You were
exactly.
always on the left-hand
That's
side.
right.
And if you went to the Bone Theater, you were always in the balcony.
Yeah.
But you never, ever sat together.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned coming in, that front door was on that faced Dalrymple Street.
Yeah, it faced.
If you were going
yeah,
out.
If you were,
And the swings were on the left-hand side.
Mhm,
going.
right.
Do you remember the trees?
Yes. There was a sidewalk.
Yeah.
And you walked up and there were trees. I
On
mean, it
both
was
sides.
real, yes.
Yeah.
Now that was nice.
Yeah, and remember in the fall, when it was to come out and all those
Mhm,
leaves?
leaves.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. When you came in that front door, and you said Miss Biggs was to the left, there was a cloakroom or a coat room, was
Mhm,
that the first thing, that
I
hallway?
think when you came in, there was the, oh, I'm trying to put myself back now. Oh, would Miss Banks be on the right? Let me see.
No, I think you were right.
Anyway, there was a cloakroom,
Mhm.
and you put your coats, boots, you know, things out there.
Yeah. And when you were in, it would have been Mrs. Ferguson's room from fourth,
Mhm.
fourth, or fifth. There was a cloakroom on the other end
Right.
as well.
And if you came in from the Albion Street side, you'd come in Miss Ferguson's room and Mrs. Holmes' room.
Mhm.
They were
On that
on
end.
that end.
Yeah.
And do you remember that loud gong? I don't know how to, it wasn't a whistle, but it was like a gong when it was time for school to start. You'd hear it.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
what I forgot.
Yes.
Yeah.
You'd hear that.
Yeah.
You knew you were late if you weren't in your
If you
seat
weren't
when
in
you
your-
heard that.
Yeah. You remember, I mean, as an adult, I've heard people talk about the condition of the building and our
Mhm.
books. Do you remember, like, the condition of the books you got?
They weren't new. I can't, you know, specifically, just say, well, it was torn, ripped here, whatever.
Yeah.
But they weren't
They
new
were not.
books, I do know that.
Okay.
Mhm.
What about the building itself? Was there ever a lack of maintenance to the point that you as a child noticed that, oh, this should be fixed or anything like that?
I can't. Sitting here now after all these years, I can't. You
Mhm.
know, there might have been things, but I can't say that I remember any.
I'm gonna switch gears for a minute, because
Okay.
speaking of that cloakroom
Mhm.
behind Miss Ferguson's class, do you remember at Halloween parties, they turned that into a spooky room?
Mhm.
Yeah, you,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. When the school was about to close, all right, Lizzie was still
And what, third?
the
fourth,
third,
something like that.
yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Do you recall hearing your parents having any kind of discussion about the possibility that it would close, or that people were considering keeping their kids home, or any of that?
Yes, that was very much discussed, because first of all, people wanted the school closed. And I was old enough to realize too that it needed closing, that it just wasn't, it wasn't up to, well, just even going to Washington Gardner, to get there and then actually see what a real school looked like. Some of my happiest days, whether I'd been to school with white kids or not, were spent at Washington Gardner. And one of the best jobs that I ever had after all these years, I worked there
Yeah, I
for
know.
many, many years, but I loved that school. The teachers were good. There were activities, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I'm getting away from.
No, I'd
But
ask
yes,
if
there
you,
were lots of discussions.
Okay.
And the thing that really stood out was that people were willing to take the chance to not send their children to school. And it was not an easy decision to make, but it was the kind of thing that, you know, when you have to put your, you know,
Take a
here's-
stand.
yeah, take a stand, and this is what they did.
okay,
And-
so did Lizzie, in that last year, did she not start school at all that year?
No,
Or did she
if I
start for?
recall, I'm trying to think, it seems like they were in school. I'd have to go back a little bit.
Yeah, for
It
maybe
seems like
a
they
month
were-
or so,
It
month and a
seems
half.
like they started school,
Mhm.
and then, they were stopped.
So
I
where
think-
did they send Lizzie after that?
Where did she go to school?
Yeah, where did she go to school?
She went to Dalrymple.
All right, so she did not go to Austin.
No, she
Okay.
did not go to Austin.
Okay.
She went to Dalrymple, and that was always a school that we wondered why we couldn't go to, because we didn't live that far from it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this big school, you know, but
Yeah.
it just wasn't done.
Okay. So, just in general, looking back at your experience at Westmore, and then when you moved, when you got to junior high, did you feel, or if it occurred to you, that you were as prepared as anybody else?
You know what? It's interesting that you asked that, because you would think, coming from an all-black segregated school with very little to work with, you would think we weren't prepared. But I recall, do you know John Vernakis?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when John and I and other kids were in, I think we had Mr. Goldsmith, Dan Goldsmith, and he taught us social studies. And there was a test that he gave us one day. So he announced who were the 2 top students in that, he said, I had 2 kids who really, really did good. John Bernakis and myself. So I really felt, and I sat there, and it really, what? But it really amazed me that, because I knew, he was from another school and everything like that, but I never, the only thing that I felt that my math, and it's interesting because then I grew up to study accounting and but I always thought my math wasn't good. But John Shearing, Mr. Shearing would always tell the students that anytime you need help with math, come in after school. I talked to my mom and I told her, I said, I'm having trouble with what? She said, okay, it was fine with her as long as I was where I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And Mr. Shearing would take time after school and work with anyone who needed help with their math.
Yeah, okay, good. Were you born in Albion?
No,
Okay, where did your family?
Georgia,
Which,
Dublin, Georgia.
oh, that's the first one, Dublin, Georgia.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dublin.
So what is that story? How did they happen to come?
Okay, the way we happened to come to Michigan was we lived in Georgia, and I was 4 years old, but some things you just don't forget. We lived on a farm, and at that time, my dad worked for, and the man's name was, his last name was Donnelly. I don't remember the first name, but it was his farm. And one Saturday, Mr. Donnelly got drunk, and my dad was taking him home on, on the tractor. He was on the tractor. He fell. He hit his head on the, I guess, concrete, whatever. My dad was accused of pushing him off the tractor and killing him. And he was arrested. Although, there was nothing to indicate that he'd done anything wrong. We lived there, I guess, for however long. But that was the turning point of our coming to Michigan.
And so he managed to get out?
Yeah, he did.
Escape?
Well, no, you say escape in the sense that he didn't go to prison or anything
Right.
for it. But there were people, white people, who knew my dad and realized and knew that, this was not something he would have done. And the man had fallen and unfortunately killed himself, but yeah.
So did you guys have a car?
No, we came to Michigan on the Greyhound bus.
That's different. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that would have been
Oh, I
mother,
was 4.
father, and
I
then
was 4
you and
years
back.
old. Well, my father didn't come with us at
Okay.
that time. It was my mother, Elaine, Mac, myself, Liz, and I don't know if you remember my brother, Billy. Billy was born with cerebral palsy. And when we came to Michigan, my mother had all these children, and she was carrying Billy in her arms, even though he was not a baby, but he wasn't physically,
Yeah.
able to. Yeah.
No, I don't remember him.
No, because he was always in cold water.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I say always. My mother kept him at home as long as she could. And then, I don't know, Bob, if you remember Miss Rue McGrew, the
Yes.
health nurse. You
Yes,
remember her?
sure do.
Okay, well, she would come to our home, to check on him every so often. And finally, she was able to convince my mother that it would be better, not only for him, but for the other children in the family, if he were you know.
Placed,
Mhm.
yeah.
And he was placed in Coldwater, and we'd go to see him often, you know.
Mhm. So when did your father come up then?
I can't remember exactly, it wasn't too long after we did, but when we first came here, my grandma, my mother's mother, lived on the corner of, okay, you know where not Gale, Brown Welding?
Yeah, yeah.
Down in there,
Yeah.
there was a house,
Mhm.
and my grandmother, Mrs. Whitehead, Hattie Whitehead, she lived there, and when we first came here, we lived with her
Okay.
until, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was saying that the other day, there were several houses
Mhm.
that when you turn right off
Yeah,
the
there
Gale.
was,
Because Ron
okay,
Gant lived down there.
Ron, let's see, cause Ron lived on the left-hand side, okay, the first house, my grandmother lived there, and then next to her, Miss Adeline Brown,
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
and then Mr. Howard Dixon.
Yeah, it was
He
a
lived
cousin
back
of mine.
there.
Did he have horses back there?
He had everything back there, I think.
Yeah.
And then there were Joe McCracken's mom, Miss
Mhm.
Love McCracken,
Yeah.
and then Mr. Gant. Okay, her house would have been the last house across the street from us. Then Mr. Gant's house was in the middle, and then there was this big house on the corner,
A cast. Mhm.
Cass and
Yeah.
Elmia. Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cass and Gail, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so did your dad work at the Malva or Gale or what?
He worked at the Gale, and, let's see, I know he worked at Gale. I don't think he ever worked at the Malva. I know he
My
worked
dad
at
didn't
Gale.
either.
And
Yeah.
I don't think my dad did.
So he worked at Gale.
Mhm.
And your mother ran the house?
More or less, my mother ran the house, but then she also did day work, you know, at white people's homes.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Because your dad was always a quiet, removed figure to me.
He was removed because he was gone a lot.
Because I spent a lot of time in your
Yeah,
house, you know.
I know, and he was gone a lot.
Because Mac and I were real
Oh, I
tight.
remember that.
Yeah, and but I remember your mother because I considered her one of my second mothers because my neighbor on the corner of Culver.
Miss Turner,
Yeah.
Miss Essie Mae.
Yeah, her son had stolen something of mine.
Bruce.
Bruce. Yeah, and I got it back, and she was coming out being defensive and really inappropriate
Mhm.
as an
Yeah,
adult
that
child.
was-
And I remember your mother crossing the street
Mhm.
and saying, "This is
Look out.
this is my boy, and you will not," you know.
Mhm.
And we tell these stories all the time, and I don't think people realize what a sense of community
That we had.
we really. I mean, it was very tight.
It was very, and remember Mama Hill?
Oh yeah, she lived next door.
Yeah, and there was Macedonia Church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then your house.
Yeah, and then our house,
Yeah.
and then going on down, then there was Culver Court, and that's where the Corneliuses lived,
Yeah.
on Culver Court.
The Reynolds lived farther down there after a while too, didn't they? Eddie Ben?
Well, actually, the house that we lived in on Culver, there was like a little break in between, and then the Reynolds, they lived there.
Yeah, and then across the street was Louis Stone.
Mm-hmm, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They were the nicest people. And next to them were on the left-hand side were the Pattersons.
Yeah, yeah,
And next to them were the Cheeks,
yeah.
Mother and
Mother
Dad
Cheek, because
Mhm.
those big apples used to
Uh-huh.
fall and we'd go up
And then
Get
next to
those.
the Cheeks were the Halls.
and, that's right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Josie-
Sylvia Davis.
Yep,
and,
Sylvia's grandparents.
Yeah.
And then her mom lived in a house next door to her parents. And then Dismuke.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forgot about this new.
Mm-hmm. lived
Okay,
there.
yeah.
And let's see, going up after the Pattersons, there were
Eleanor
Kate-
Hall
the Halls
and Woody Wilson.
Woody Wilson, and then eventually Katie Baldwin
That's right.
lived
Mhm.
in that house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, I remember better years ago.
Yeah, no, it's,
Mhm. And remember our little store?
Yeah, Mr. Pearson. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Brenda's dad,
Chuck Simmons.
Chuck Simmons.
yeah, and Josh
And
Malachi,
cutting hair,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. He used to give
was
me free
everybody's
haircuts.
barber. Mhm.
because he was a friend of my father. In fact, most of my impressions of my father come from stories that
Mhm.
Mr. Malachi would tell
I'll
me,
tell you about it.
sitting in the chair, in between answering the phone for the numbers.
But you know, what's interesting is just sitting here looking back now, we had a happy childhood growing up.
Absolutely.
We really did.
Oh, absolutely.
We really, really did.
I think we were some of the most fortunate kids, for sure. I know, looking back, when I lived with my Uncle George on Cat,
Mhm.
I know those guys, in retrospect, really worked hard. I mean, I think he lost 2 fingers in the machine's mouth. But they provided for us
Mhm.
a large measure of security and
And when you say security, it was like you said about my mother, everybody looked out for everyone's child, you
Mhm.
know. There were no children who were lost,
yeah,
you know, in
Yeah.
the cracks or anything, because if my mother was gone and Miss Cheek saw us misbehaving, she'd let us know
Oh, yeah.
about it or whoever, but when I look back on it now, and it's so different.
well,
you know,
and
now.
then that was accepted
It was
practice.
the accepted practice.
And now it's like, you don't dare
No,
touch my
no,
child.
no.
But, yeah,
Mhm.
no, it was,
It was
I have nothing but
good
really
memories.
good memories, you know, and I know we were extremely poor,
We were too.
but none of us really
But we
knew it.
didn't.
We were all the same.
Because at Easter time, the
Yeah.
girls got new dresses.
Yeah.
When school started, my mother would go down to Penny's and she'd lay away some dresses, you know, for
Yeah.
us to start school in. And, you just
We
felt,
made do.
yeah, we did.
Yeah.
But you look back now and really those were good times. I mean, they were, as you said, we were poor, but we weren't poor in spirit.
Not at all.
you
We
know,
were rich,
we
in fact.
were.
Yeah.
We had people who loved us and people who took care of us, and
Yeah.
so it really was good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I think about in 18 years before, I moved 8 times in probably less than a square mile of
Mhm.
space, because I lived up the street from you. I think
Mhm.
that was about 4th, 5th grade.
Mhm.
And then I lived around the corner, next to Josh Malachi with my Uncle George.
Right on Cass
On
Street.
Cass,
Mhm.
yeah. And then I lived down on Michigan with my Uncle Willie.
Yes, I forgot about him.
Yeah. And we had lived, actually, when I was born on Washington, next door to Bethel.
Mhm.
And then later we lived at the old cider mill
Mhm.
on Washington.
Mhm.
And when I was really little, we lived on Gale Street. And because we rented downstairs, Mr. Biggs had this big house right
Mhm.
next to Bill Harris. And we rented
I remember
downstairs.
that house.
Yeah, it's a big.
Yes, we lived there for a while. I always thought that house was haunted. I'm serious.
Yeah. Oh, so you lived there too?
Yeah.
Had an outhouse in the back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, by the time we were there was a bathroom inside, but it stopped working, but, I was.
And no hot water inside, at least when we were there.
Mhm. And when we lived on Culver Street, let's see, yeah, we had an outhouse.
On Culver too?
Yes, we did.
I don't think we had one on Culver,
We
but I
did.
know we did on Gale.
We definitely had one.
Okay. Well, we've been reminiscing. Do you guys have some questions?
Incredible.
So were you born at home, Bob?
I think so. Yeah, 2:15 in the morning. Yeah. But in those days, the doctors all came to your house for everything.
Mhm.
Did you have Dr. Campbell? Alice
Honestly,
Campbell?
you know what, I did not have her until I had my last, I think it was the last child. She delivered Keitha. my
Oh,
last-
really?
Yeah, my last
Wow.
child. Dr. Kiefer was, remember from home, Concord, he'd always make home calls.
I didn't know he
Always,
was there.
Yeah, he'd make, home visits.
I remember Dr. Campbell, and then my mother's doctor was Dr. Taylor, Clifford
Mhm.
Taylor.
Okay, I remember the name. I don't
Yeah.
know
But yeah,
now.
I mean, you didn't go to the hospital when the doctor came to you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm getting back to something you asked me earlier about teachers, and I remember this so well. Miss Tenhade, Mrs. Tenhade, she was the home economics teacher at Washington
Yeah.
Gardner.
Yeah.
And I recall, you never, ever saw her outside of school. And, I mean, when you'd see your teachers at school, but you didn't see them.
No.
And then one time, we were at the store, and we saw her. And it was like, I mean, it was just weird, because you saw them in school.
Yeah.
And when school was out, they disappeared. You
Yeah.
never saw them.
I think the only one who might have been an exception was Olga Hicks. And I'm not sure where I saw her, but she was an extraordinary person.
She was very, very outgoing,
Mhm.
very open, very warm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember she was the first, including all the teachers at Westport, she was the first teacher that I had that talked about international blacks, because
Mhm.
she introduced me to Dumas and the Three Musketeers and she pointed out to the class, well, you know, all these books are written by this black man.
Mhm. But she was.
And she was just-
She was very progressive, she was very, maybe above, ahead of her time even.
Yeah.
But she was a good teacher.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
I have a question, since you
Sure.
know the neighborhood so well, and someone told us about a gathering place on Washington Street where people got together, kind of I don't know if it was a club or a teenage hangout, or,
You know what they're talking about, at that time, okay, the cider mill.
oh yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
okay, because people would rent.
The lodge hall.
For, yes,
Yeah.
they would rent it for receptions, whatever, yeah.
well, someone stopped us on the street when we were doing the Holland Park restoration, and they said there was something right down on Washington Street on the edge of the school where kids got together and hung out.
Oh, Bodix.
Yeah, that was, it was really right
That was-
across the street from the Gale office
Mhm.
building on the corner of Cass and
And-
Washington.
Yeah, it was, okay, it was, you were talking about a teen hangout? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yes.
like, it had gone through many phases, because when I was a kid, I think it was a tavern
It might have been.
when I was real little,
Uh-huh.
because I remember my Uncle George taking me with him into more than one bar. But that was the first one. Because I really believe that at an early age, my first exposure to what I now know is jazz was in that, on a
In that
jukebox or
building,
something, in that building.
Well, you know, when we were teenagers, this place, it was right on the corner of, what was it? It was Albion Street and Washington Street. And it was the place to go. He had this jukebox, and booths where you could buy hamburgers, stuff like that. I mean, kids came from Lansing, Battle Creek, Jackson, all over. It was really, and I recall as a teenager, if you did not go to church, don't even think about asking to go there.
Yeah.
That was, you know, if you didn't go to church, and remember BTU?
Oh, yes.
Baptist Training Union.
Yeah.
We didn't go to that. We couldn't go, you know. I mean, really. And it sounds harsh when I say it now, but that was how we were raised, was that we went to Sunday school, we went to church, and we went to Baptist Training Union at 5:30 on Sunday afternoons.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I got old enough to figure out ways to get around that.
Mhm.
And we were
Who
very-
told us about that place? Somebody came
I
up.
talked about it.
You talked about it?
The fact that, you know, that's where we were exposed to parliamentary procedure and how to take minutes. And because you remember in BTU we had to read the
Right,
minutes.
we had to read them,
And
we
then
had
be
to write
critiqued.
them. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mrs. Houston.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
She
Ardella
was,
Houston.
yes, Ardella. She was our Baptist Training Union teacher.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And she was also a Sunday school teacher.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, Bob, there was another place too, down Midway. Do you remember that?
Oh, the Quonset hut.
Right.
Yeah, that was
shaped
down
like a Quonset hut, and it was farther down.
on Michigan. The
No,
corner-
no, this was, well, yeah.
Past
Okay.
Michigan, right past Michigan.
Okay, it was, what's the street that breaks?
That little street is
Okay,
Michigan.
it was right just
Between,
beyond.
yeah, between
Right.
Michigan and the river.
And Michigan and the river, yeah, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Midway. Because I remember, gosh, there was some kind of little talent show or something. I must have been in 7th or 8th grade.
Mhm.
And I remember playing my trombone there. And it, yeah, Midway.
It was, I just thought about that.
So that was like a cafe or?
No, it wasn't a
No,
cafe.
exactly.
It was, it was a place that was used for special occasions.
Right, and I don't, as kids, we didn't,
We didn't
you
really
know,
go in
that
there.
wasn't for us.
No. But
I can't remember.
because I only remember being in there because I was performing.
Right, and I can only remember being in there once,
Yeah.
but it wasn't, it wasn't a place, you know.
It didn't seem like it was conducive to
Mm-mm,
hanging
but-
out
No.
because there weren't a lot of chairs and tables
Do
and
you
things.
remember the street dances?
Yeah, yeah. You want to tell them about the street dance?
Okay.
Let me move my camera,
Okay.
Willie. Okay.
On, what was it,
Washington.
Washington, on Washington Street, I don't know what days, maybe Thursday.
Thursday
or something.
comes to
Thursday
mind,
nights,
I
the
think.
Thursday comes to mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, the street was closed off, and, I don't know where.
It was
the
like
race
city
came
recreation
from.
or
Yeah,
somebody
it was
would
like a
bring in.
recreational thing, and somebody would bring in music, and and everybody danced in the street, and they were street dances. It was really, it was a fun thing.
Yeah.
And
Always
then-
in the evening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and remember Mrs. Lee and the playground in the summer?
I remember her as the most frequent substitute teacher I had.
Okay.
But
She was, okay, in the summertime, she was in charge of West Ward Playground.
Playground. I remember it was a
Yeah.
playground 'cause
Mhm.
we used to play croquet
Yeah,
and
croquet,
badminton. Yeah.
badminton, all of those things, but
Yeah.
she was in charge of the summer
Yeah, I forgot that.
program at
That's
Westport.
right,
Mhm.
yeah. And she lived right across
Right
the street.
across the street, and, it was a nice program.
Mhm.
Mhm. That's why I learned to play croquet.
Yeah, me too.
Checkers.
Yeah.
all that stuff. Mhm.
We're hoping to bring checkers back into the park with the new, some checker tables are kind of in the game thing, it'll be fun. The dances that you had in the street, did you have
Mhm.
live music?
Oh, no, it
No,
was
it was
recorded music.
recorded.
But they would bring big speakers and, everything was record players, of
Uh-huh.
course. And, it's like, a lot of people were, it just wasn't kids, it was
There was
adults.
just
Oh,
adults,
yeah,
I mean,
everybody.
everybody came, and, and it was exactly what it was called, street dances.
Yeah.
The street was closed off for a certain
Yeah.
amount of time,
Yeah.
and people danced, and
They probably went on till, what, 10 o'clock at night?
so I would say.
Did they include food? Did they
No.
bring picnics? or
No, it
just-
was just recreational dancing.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
When do you think that ended? Not that,
Ooh.
at time of night, but
Oh,
just
I know. what you
faded
mean,
away.
Time period.
It seemed like it was there the whole time I was in elementary, but I'm not sure about the last year, because I had moved to the projects then.
And I can't, I don't.
But I know, it must have been up through 52 maybe, because I was in 5th grade. And my last year, I don't recall, because we had moved to the projects.
That sounds, it sounds good, because my husband that I eventually married was, all this was going on, street dancing and whatever, and at that time, I wasn't, dating or anything like that, but I remember the older guys, they'd come over and
Yeah.
dance with the girls and everything, but,
There were lots of adults there.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Growing up, do you remember coming to this library as a child?
This library,
Yeah.
let me think. I can't say for sure that I did, but I do know that at the junior high, I spent most of my time, in the library when I wasn't in class or whatever. And at that time, there was a big study hall.
Yeah.
And after attendance was taken in study hall, you could go into the library. And I remember every day going into the
Yeah,
library.
because you could go out the back
Mhm.
door right
Yeah,
into
right
the library. Yeah.
And that was my favorite place.
Mhm.
Bob, do you remember as a youngster coming to this library?
Yeah, because, it was just the old building, and you had to go up those steps at the front to get in, not this
I
building.
know what you're talking about, yeah.
And, I remember, I remember coming in and feeling awkward. It was deathly quiet, and which was okay with me. And I didn't see many people around. And I remember looking for a book and using the old card catalog. And I can't remember if I checked it out or not, or if I could check it out. But I remember coming once or twice looking for something. And both times it was the same, just really quiet. And I didn't remember the librarian as being very bubbly. I mean, just very late, tight and minimal conversation about whatever it was I was trying to find. But I didn't come, but I think just 2 times.
I remember not, you know, when growing up, as I said before, you usually, you didn't travel alone by yourself, you know. And certain places, if it was a certain distance or something away from your home, unless someone was with you, you just didn't go. I don't mean racially, but just because our parents didn't allow us to just wander around without, you know.
Oh, you didn't leave the neighborhood after dark?
No, no.
I mean, really, we were in,
I think street lights, remember the street lights?
Yeah, yeah, we were
Street lights
in.
come on.
You come in,
Mhm.
yeah, and seemed like a lot of kids would be called home from dinner or something like
Mhm.
between 5 and 6 around
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Because I know we would always be out on Culver,
Mhm.
and people's parents would just come on the porch and yell.
Yeah, and do you remember being told that if you're at somebody's house, you do not eat?
Yeah.
If it's time for them to eat, you come home.
You come home,
Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So what kind of games did neighborhood kids play? Growing up in Oregon, we did hide and seek and kick the can.
Okay,
That-
we did hide and seek, we did kickball, baseball. I don't remember.
When we were, we shot a lot of marbles, the boys
Oh,
did.
yes.
Because I remember
yes,
your brother
marbles,
had
man,
cans of marbles,
oh,
yeah.
Yes.
And we played cowboys with
Mhm.
stick horses,
Yes,
And
I
we-
forgot about that.
and we would have these really elaborate carvings in our horses
Mhm.
because you cut, you score the bark and then you could peel it, and then you'd have to take the knife and scratch that liquidy surface down to the pure
And
white.
The girls did it too. I mean, we played cowboys.
Yeah.
And remember, because the trees were behind your house,
Mhm.
and they were the kind that they were pliable, you know, you could,
Yeah.
yeah, you could really do some things with them.
And we did a lot of archery. We used to take those, we had cane fishing poles, bamboo, and we would split them in half and make bowls. And there was a weed in back of your house and mostly behind Macedonia.
Mhm.
There was a weed we could pull and you could file the root on the edge of the curb. And it was very sharp.
Like
Or
a
we would
spear.
take a pop bottle cap
Mhm.
and bend it and hammer it on for the head of the